Agatha Raisin and the Fatal Chapter of the Cookbook. Dear listeners, welcome to tonight's mystery. I'm Sam, your host, and I'm delighted to have you join me for another captivating tale. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? Share your answer in the comments. I always enjoy hearing from our wonderful community. And do not forget to like and subscribe me for more mysteries every day. Now, let's get cozy and dive into tonight's story. Chapter 1. The Recipe That Shouldn't Exist. Agatha Raisin liked to believe she had perfected the art of peaceful mornings, though, truth be told, peace rarely lasted more than 3 minutes in her life. Still, she tried. On this particular morning, she shuffled into her cozy Carsley cottage kitchen, wrapped in a thick robe the color of storm clouds, and set the kettle on with a sigh that suggested both comfort and mild annoyance with the world. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee soon drifted through the room, blending with the faint smell of lavender from last night's diffuser. The village was quiet, wrapped in early sunlight and the usual Cotswold charm that made everything look like the front of a postcard. Agatha inhaled deeply, savoring the rare tranquility. She had every intention of spending the morning reading, preferably something light, preferably something with absolutely no murders whatsoever. The universe, as always, had other plans. A sharp knock shattered the calm. Agatha paused, mug in midair. If that's someone selling solar panels again, I'll show them what despair looks like before noon. She marched to the front door and opened it, only to find no one there. No footsteps, no car driving away, nothing but a small rectangular parcel resting neatly on the doormat. Brown paper, tied with twine, old-fashioned and utterly unhelpful in revealing its sender. Agatha narrowed her eyes. Oh, marvelous! Anonymous parcels, always the start of something delightful. She picked it up. It was surprisingly warm, as though it had been tucked under someone's arm only moments before. The paper felt soft, almost velvety. Something about it prickled at her instincts, a sensation between curiosity and unease. Carrying it inside, she set the box on the kitchen table and took a cautious sip of coffee before untangling the twine. The paper peeled away easily, revealing an old leather-bound cookbook. The cover read, "Cotswold Culinary Secrets." Agatha blinked. She had never heard of such a book, and she certainly hadn't ordered it. The leather was cracked and worn, the edges frayed with age, yet when she placed her fingertips on the surface, the warmth intensified slightly, almost like the lingering heat from a hand recently lifted. Her brows pinched together. "Well, that's not ominous at all," she murmured. She opened the book and instantly smelled something earthy, like dried herbs mixed with old parchment. Most of the pages were handwritten in a delicate, looping script that looked decades old, maybe older. But what stopped her cold was the loose sheet tucked between 2 brittle pages. It didn't belong. The paper was crisp, white, fresh, completely out of place in a book that looked older than she was. Neat handwriting, undeniably recent, flowed across the page. At the top, in elegant but firm strokes, were the words, "The Fatal Chapter." Agatha's pulse flickered. Oh, for heaven's sake, why can't anything just be normal? She examined the page closer. The ink was dry, but looked new, the handwriting unfamiliar. The recipe beneath the title was strange. Ingredients she didn't recognize, instructions that were vague, and a final line written in smaller, sharper letters. This one must never be made. Agatha sat back, her detective instincts humming awake like bees disturbed in a hive. Someone had added this page intentionally. Someone wanted her to find it, and someone, for reasons she couldn't yet guess, had gone to great lengths to make it happen. The warmth of the book, the absence of a sender, the mismatch of ages, the warning. Her morning peace was thoroughly ruined, and a new mystery had arrived at her doorstep, quite literally. She closed the cookbook gently, though her mind was racing. "All right," she said aloud, as if addressing the universe. "You've got my attention." And Agatha Raisin, once properly intrigued, never backed away from a mystery.
Agatha kept the cookbook on the table as though it might scurry away if she turned her back. The loose page labeled "The Fatal Chapter" lay beside it, looking cleaner and newer than anything that should have been inside a book this old. She exhaled slowly, then pulled the cookbook closer and began flipping through it, careful not to damage the fragile pages. Almost immediately, she noticed something strange. The numbering didn't follow any sensible order. Page 13 jumped to page 21. Page 32 appeared twice, each version containing completely different recipes. Several sections were missing entirely, leaving jagged edges where they had been ripped out. It looked less like a cookbook and more like a puzzle, missing half its pieces. "What on earth happened to you?" Agatha muttered. She leaned in. Some pages were stained with blotches of deep purple, almost like crushed berries, except the color seemed too vivid. Others had a sticky amber residue that smelled faintly medicinal. A few carried smudges so dark they looked like charcoal, yet rubbed off under her fingers like soft soot. Strange ingredients were listed, names she didn't recognize, plants she didn't recall ever seeing in any shop or garden. The deeper she went, the stronger a scent grew, burnt sugar, warm and bitter, curling faintly upward like the ghost of caramel left too long on the stove. It intensified whenever she touched the inserted chapter page, as though it were releasing something into the air. Agatha wrinkled her nose and pushed the sheet back. That is definitely not normal. Her instincts nudged her toward action. When Agatha didn't know what to make of something, she called Roy. Roy Silver always had some sort of gossip tucked into his pocket, and even if half of it turned out to be nonsense, he rarely disappointed when it came to obscure information. She dialed him. He answered in his usual breathy rush. "Aggie, tell me you finally decided to take a spa day? Your aura sounded exhausted last week." "Roy," Agatha snapped, "have you heard anything about an old cookbook called Cotswold Culinary Secrets?" There was a beat of silence, followed by a dramatic gasp. "You're kidding! Don't tell me someone sent you something about that ridiculous thing." Agatha frowned. "Ridiculous? Oh, you know how people in food circles get. There's been chatter about a deadly recipe going round. Some claim it's a hoax, some say it came from a lost manuscript, others insist it's cursed. All very over the top. You'd think chefs were witches the way they talk about it." Deadly recipe, cursed, lost manuscript. Agatha felt a cold thread wind through her chest. "Well, I've got the book, and someone added a new page to it." "Added? Recently?" "Yes, very recently." "That's unsettling," Roy admitted. "Be careful, Aggie. People get obsessed with these things. You know how weird collectors are." "Oh, I'm aware," she said dryly. They spoke a little longer, but Roy had nothing concrete, only rumors, whispers, and dramatic embellishments from food-obsessed acquaintances. Still, the fact that anyone was talking about a dangerous recipe at all made her skin prickle. After hanging up, Agatha closed the cookbook, intending to set it aside for the moment. Instead, when she turned it over, something thin slipped from behind the back cover and fluttered onto the table. A note, small, handwritten, and unmistakably deliberate. She picked it up and read the sharp, slanted letters. "Return what isn't yours." Agatha's breath caught. Her gaze flicked toward the window automatically, half expecting someone to be staring in. But the garden beyond was quiet, sunlight drifting lazily over the hedge. The cottage felt warm and safe, yet the message chilled her in a way she didn't like admitting. Someone believed she had taken the cookbook, someone who might know exactly what it contained and what the inserted chapter meant. She set the note down carefully. "This is getting absurd," she whispered, "and I refuse to let some mysterious busybody frighten me. but fear was there, humming quietly beneath her confidence. Still, Agatha Raisin never backed away from the unknown. She squared her shoulders, gathered the cookbook, and made up her mind. There was one person in Carsley who might know the truth about old culinary manuscripts and why someone wanted this one hidden. She would pay the village historian a visit.
Chapter 2. The Historian with Missing Pages. Agatha Raisin had visited nearly every oddball in the Cotswolds over the years, but Mr. Penwell's cottage still managed to surprise her each time she approached it. Perched at the edge of Carsley, half hidden behind a tangle of wild hedges and stubbornly leaning trees, it looked less like a residence and more like a museum that had been accidentally dropped into a garden. The path leading to the front steps was littered with old crates labeled with fading ink, manuscripts, vintage recipes, and oddly, damaged but important. Only a historian would think that a reassuring category. Agatha straightened her coat against the brisk morning air and marched forward, clutching the ancient cookbook under her arm. The leather cover felt warm again, irritatingly warm, as if it were adjusting to her grip. "Don't start behaving like a haunted relic. I haven't even had lunch yet." She knocked sharply at Mr. Penwell's door. A pause, then the sound of at least 3 bolts being undone. Finally, the door cracked open, revealing Penwell's bespectacled eyes peering out like a nervous tortoise. "Mrs. Raisin," he said, voice hushed, "you didn't mention you were coming. If I did, you'd have found a way to hide. May I come in?" Penwell hesitated for 2 beats, then opened the door fully, stepping aside with a stiff, resigned motion. His living room, if it could be called that, was a paper jungle. Stacks of manuscripts towered precariously on every surface. Shelves overflowed. Even the lampshades had notes pinned to them. "Tea?" he asked, though his tone suggested he hoped she'd decline. "No tea. I'm here for expertise." Agatha marched to the only clear table, placed the cookbook upon it, and crossed her arms expectantly. "Tell me what I've found." Penwell's expression softened into polite curiosity, until his eyes landed on the book. The color drained from his face so swiftly that for a moment Agatha feared she'd have to catch him. His lips parted, and he pointed a trembling finger at the leather spine. "Is that... It can't be—" "It is," Agatha said, enjoying the dramatic effect more than she probably should. "Cotswold Culinary Secrets, delivered to me without explanation, and quite annoyingly smug." Penwell didn't laugh. He pulled out a chair and sat down as though his legs had given up negotiating with him. "Mrs. Raisin," he whispered, leaning forward, "this book was believed to belong to Eugenia Crothers, a chef of some fame in the 1960s. Brilliant, eccentric, and, depending on whom you ask, dangerous." "Dangerous," Agatha said, raising an eyebrow. "Did she attack critics with spatulas?" Penwell didn't blink. "She vanished, entirely, in the middle of writing what she claimed would be the definitive Cotswold cookbook. But her final chapter, well, there were rumors." He adjusted his glasses with a shaking hand, "that she was working on a recipe capable of causing illness, or worse, if prepared incorrectly." "That sounds ridiculous," Agatha said, though a shiver crawled up her back. "This wasn't ordinary food poisoning," Penwell insisted. "People spoke of odd symptoms, strange behavior. Some said the recipe was more ritual than culinary." Agatha stared at him, trying to gauge whether he was exaggerating for effect, but his pallor told a different story. He swallowed hard, then forced himself to look more closely at the book. When he brushed his fingers over the cover, he recoiled slightly. "It's warm." "Yes," Agatha said. "I thought it was my nerves." "No, Eugenia's manuscripts were rumored to have properties." He cleared his throat, visibly attempting to steady himself. May I examine the last inserted page?" "You may," Agatha said. Before Penwell could open the book, his expression shifted abruptly. Panic flickered across his features. I'll need a moment," he stammered, rising from his chair. He darted toward a side room and shut the door behind him. Immediately, Agatha heard frantic rustling, papers shifting, drawers opening, something metallic clattering to the floor. "Mr. Penwell," she called.
No answer, only more frantic rustling, and the chilling sense that whatever he had remembered, he didn't want her to know.
Agatha waited a full minute after Penwell disappeared behind the door. The rustling continued, papers shuffling, something heavy being moved, then an unmistakable thud, followed by hushed muttering. She tapped her foot. Patience was not one of her virtues, particularly when someone behaved suspiciously within arm's reach of her. "Mr. Penwell," she called again. Nothing. Well, if he wasn't going to explain his sudden panic, she would simply help herself to whatever clues he was so desperate to hide. Agatha drifted toward the nearest bookshelf, pretending to examine spines, while her eyes scanned the floor for anything out of place. It didn't take long. Near the bottom shelf, half tucked beneath a stack of old pamphlets, lay a torn ledger page, yellowed with age, but still crisp at the edges, as though someone had ripped it free recently. She crouched and slid it out. The page was titled Culinary Archive, Loans and Transfers. A tidy column listed cookbook titles with corresponding borrower names, dates, and notes. Most entries were dull, returned in fair condition, water damage minor, missing page 14, but her eyes snagged on the line written in darker ink, as though pressed harder. Cotswold Culinary Secrets. Borrower, Eugenia Crowther. Status, never returned. Note, ownership disputed. Keep confidential. Agatha felt her pulse quicken. So Penwell had records he hadn't volunteered, and the cryptic ownership disputed raised an unsettling question. Why would a cookbook cause conflict significant enough to be documented? Before she could read further, the door to the side room creaked open. Penwell reappeared, paler than before, wiping his hands on a handkerchief that trembled between his fingers. Mrs. Raisin, I must ask you to leave. Immediately." Agatha straightened slowly, slipping the ledger page behind another stack. She'd return to it in a moment. "Leave? I still have questions, and I'm afraid I have no more answers." Penwell's gaze darted toward the cookbook on his table. He looked at it as though it were a lit fuse. "Please, do not open the inserted chapter. Whatever you do, do not attempt the recipe." Agatha gave him a hard, assessing stare. "Are you warning me because you're genuinely concerned, or because you're hiding something?" He flinched. That was answer enough. "Mrs. Raisin," he said, lowering his voice to a near whisper, "some things go missing for a reason. If that book has reappeared, it means someone wants it found, or someone wants it buried again." He swallowed. "Please trust me. Stop looking into this." Agatha had no intention of doing anything such as thing, but she nodded politely and moved toward the door. Penwell didn't walk her out. He stayed where he was, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the table. Agatha stepped outside, the cold air biting her cheeks. As she reached the garden gate, something made her glance back. A curtain in Penwell's front window shifted, a narrow, trembling gap, and behind it, Penwell's frightened face watched her leave, as though terrified she might not make it home. Agatha hurried back to her cottage, annoyance simmering beneath her ribs. She pushed open her front door, expecting the familiar scent of lemon polish and yesterday's tea, but something felt wrong the moment she stepped inside. The air was disturbed, subtle, but not subtle enough for someone like her. A cushion on her sofa stood at a slightly different angle. A draft lingered near the kitchen, though no window was open. Agatha's stomach tightened as she moved to the table where she'd left the cookbook earlier that morning. The inserted page, the freshly written, fatal chapter, was gone. Agatha stared at the empty space inside the book, her breath catching. Someone had entered her cottage. Someone had taken the very page Penwell feared most, and that meant two unsettling possibilities. Either someone wanted the cookbook secrets exposed, or someone was determined to make sure Agatha never uncovered them. Either way, the mystery had stopped being theoretical. It had entered her home.
Chapter 3. Whispers from the Cotswold Kitchen.
The morning bustle at the Carsley Cafe was already in full swing when Agatha pushed open the door. A warm wave of buttery air rolled toward her, thick with the scent of scones fresh from the oven. She paused for a moment, allowing the familiarity of clinking teacups and soft chatter to settle her nerves after the unsettling events of the previous day. If there was one place in the village where rumors sprouted faster than weeds, it was here. And today, Agatha needed rumors more than she needed breakfast, though she fully intended to have both. Mrs. Blocksby spotted her immediately. "Agatha, dear, come sit. You look as though you spent the night wrestling with a hedgehog." "I'd prefer wrestling a hedgehog. At least they don't send threatening notes or vanish into history books." Mrs. Blocksby blinked, startled. "Goodness, this sounds serious." "It is," Agatha said, lowering her voice. "But first, tea, and one of those scones, preferably the largest." The vicar's wife signaled to the young server, who hurried over with a pot of steaming Earl Grey and a plate of scones so soft they sank under the butter knife. Agatha inhaled deeply. The cafe, with its checkered tablecloths and gentle hum, offered a comforting contrast to the mysterious cookbook sitting back at her cottage. Mrs. Blocksby leaned forward. "I actually hope to see you today. There's been talk." "Of course there's been talk," Agatha said dryly. "There's always talk." "Yes, but this is different. 3 villagers have reported peculiar incidents involving their old cookbooks." "Define peculiar." "Well," Mrs. Blocksby said, lowering her voice to an excited whisper, "Mrs. Fetteridge swears several pages in her grandmother's baking book turned black, as though burnt. No fire, no scorch marks on anything else. Just the pages." Agatha raised an eyebrow. "Odd. And Mr. Diggle claims recipes in his antique jam-making journal disappeared entirely. Blank pages. Then reappeared the next morning with tiny red stains all over them." "Jam?" Agatha asked. "He said it wasn't jam," Mrs. Blocksby replied. Agatha set down her teacup. The cafe noise seemed to dim. "And what about the third incident? Harriet Blunt. Poor woman fainted in her pantry." "Over a cookbook?" Mrs. Blocksby nodded fervently. "She opened an old volume she inherited from her aunt. The page she turned to was titled The Forbidden Syrup. Harriet insists she saw a second line appear below it, handwritten, glowing faintly." Agatha straightened. "Glowing? That's what she said. And you know Harriet, she exaggerates when discussing her garden, but never her fainting spells." Agatha quietly absorbed this. 3 villagers with different stories, but each involving old cookbooks behaving strangely, and Penwell's terror still echoed in her mind. "Do any of these people have connections to Eugenia Cruther?" Agatha asked casually. Mrs. Blocksby tapped her chin. "Possibly. Mrs. Fetteridge used to work at a tea-room where Eugenia tested recipes. Mr. Diggle's wife studied baking under a chef who claimed to know Eugenia personally. And Harriet's aunt once ran the Cotswold Food Society, the group that supposedly criticized her final manuscript." Agatha smiled thinly. "So, 3 connections. And," Mrs. Blocksby added, "none of them wanted to speak openly. They're frightened." Agatha stood. "Then I'll find them myself. Subtle questioning, calm reassurance, light intimidation if needed." Mrs. Blocksby sighed. "Please don't start a village riot." "I never start riots. They simply occur near me." She reached for her handbag, preparing to leave, when a server hurried over. "Mrs. Raisin, you left this on the table." Agatha frowned. "I haven't left anything." The server handed her a folded sheet of yellowed paper. She unfolded it slowly. It was an old handwritten recipe, ingredients written in elegant looping script, and at the bottom, in fresh ink, unmistakable, "For Agatha." Her stomach tightened. Someone in the cafe had left it for her, and they were close enough to know her name. Harriet Blunt lived in a modest cottage at the end of Lavender Row, a pretty lane wrapped in climbing roses that gave no hint of the nervous woman who resided inside. When Agatha knocked, she heard a rustle,
A pause, then the soft scrape of a chain sliding free. The door opened only halfway. "Mrs. Blunt, I'm Agatha Raisin." Harriet's eyes darted around Agatha as though expecting someone else to be lurking behind her. "You're here about the cookbook?" It wasn't a question. "Yes," Agatha replied gently. "I was told you had an incident." Harriet hesitated, then opened the door fully. "Come in, but don't touch anything in the kitchen." Agatha stepped inside and immediately noticed the absence of cooking smells. For a cottage kitchen in Carsley, that alone was unusual. The counter held a thin layer of dust, and even the kettle looked like it hadn't been used in days. "Would you like tea?" Harriet asked automatically, then winced. "Sorry, habit. I don't make anything anymore." Agatha sat at the tidy kitchen table. "Mrs. Bloxby said you found a recipe that frightened you." Harriet folded her hands tightly, knuckles whitening. "It wasn't just fear. It was like the air around me changed. I hadn't even read more than the title when it happened." "What was the recipe called?" I shuddered. "The forbidden syrup. My aunt's cookbook was old but harmless. I used it often. Then one morning that page appeared. I swear to you, it wasn't there the night before." Agatha leaned in. "And when you opened it, I felt a heaviness. My chest tightened, my vision blurred. Not from cooking, just from reading. I dropped the book and couldn't bring myself to touch it again." Harriet looked down at her hands. "I gave up cooking that day. Even simple things frightened me after that." Agatha softened her tone. "Harriet, can you tell me about the woman who came asking about the cookbook?" Her breath caught. It took a moment before she nodded. "Yes, she came years ago. Pale woman, sharp features, dark hair pulled back into a tight twist. She wore an old chef's jacket, faded, frayed at the cuffs, as if she'd worn it for decades. She knocked late in the evening and asked whether my aunt owned any unusual culinary manuscripts." "Did she give a name?" "No." Harriet paused, but she behaved as if she expected me to recognize her. Stood perfectly still, staring at me with this strange intensity. Agatha raised an eyebrow. "Strange how?" "Like she wasn't quite normal. Her voice was too calm. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I remember thinking she looked like someone from an old photograph who'd stepped out of the frame." Agatha, despite herself, felt a faint chill. "Did she mention Eugenia Crother?" "Only that some of her work had gone missing. She asked whether I'd seen a certain chapter." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And then, a week later, I received a loose page in the post, a page that looked just like the one you're holding now." Agatha stiffened. "The inserted chapter?" Harriet nodded. "Yes. At the bottom, someone had written, 'Don't let it fall into the wrong hands.' I burnt it, or I tried to, but the paper wouldn't catch. It curled slightly, darkened at the edges, but it never burned fully." She looked up, trembling. "I threw it out after that. I didn't want it anywhere near me." Agatha exhaled slowly. "You think the woman, the pale woman, sent it?" Harriet wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't know, but she wanted something, and I didn't give it to her." Agatha studied her carefully. "Did she ever come back?" Harriet's eyes lost focus, as though seeing something far away, or someone. "No, but she'll come back for what they've lost." Agatha's spine tingled. Harriet met her gaze directly, voice steady despite her trembling hands. "She'll come back for it, Mrs. Raisin. You have something she wants." Chapter 4. A dinner invitation turned sour. Agatha Raisin prided herself on hosting evenings that loosened tongues, especially when mystery hovered over the village. Her cottage glowed warmly as dusk settled, lanterns flickering against the windows, while the smell of roasted herbs drifted through the rooms. She had arranged everything with strategic precision. Harriet seated near the window for fresh air, Mrs. Bloxby beside the hearth for comfort, and Ellie, the cafe owner, close to Agatha herself, where every whisper could be easily caught. "Lovely spread, Agatha," Ellie said, admiring the table of roasted vegetables, delicate pastries, and a pie Mrs. Blocksby had insisted on bringing. "Almost makes me forget why we're here." Agatha gave a tight smile. "Almost." Harriet sat stiffly, refusing to touch her plate. "I still don't like being near anything culinary. No offense." "None taken," Agatha said. "Tonight's just talk. Harmless talk." That reassurance barely settled before a soft knock sounded at the front door. Everyone looked at Agatha. "Expecting someone else?" Mrs. Blocksby asked. "No," Agatha replied, frowning. "Not a soul." She crossed the small hallway and opened the door a cautious inch. A woman stood on the doorstep. Her skin was pale, almost luminous in the lantern's glow, her features sharp, precise as though sketched in ink, and she wore a faded chef's jacket, old-fashioned with loose threads dangling from the cuffs. Her dark hair was pulled tightly back, giving her an ageless, severe look. "Mrs. Raisin?" she asked, voice smooth and strangely measured. "I hope I'm not intruding. I was told you're hosting a gathering of those interested in culinary history." Agatha's stomach dipped. "And you are?" "A food blogger," the woman said, with a polite nod. "I write about lost culinary texts. When I heard you had acquired something rare, I simply couldn't resist stopping by." Agatha hesitated. She hadn't told anyone outside this room about the cookbook, not a single person. Still, manners forced her to open the door wider. "I suppose you can join us, briefly." The woman stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Harriet shrank back in her chair the moment she entered. Agatha gestured politely. "Everyone, this is Miss—" "Call me Celine," the woman said, settling herself gracefully at the table. She touched nothing, not her plate, not her fork, not even the napkin placed before her. Ellie attempted friendliness. "So, you're a blogger. Must be exciting." Celine gave a soft smile. "Exciting, yes. Dangerous, often." Mrs. Blocksby blinked. "Dangerous?" "Oh, yes," Celine replied. "Some recipes are meant to stay hidden. Some books were written to protect their readers, not feed them." Harriet whimpered under her breath. Agatha kept her tone steady. "And how exactly would you know that?" Celine's eyes flicked toward her, dark and unreadable. "Most people," Celine echoed softly, "haven't heard what you have now seen." The words hung in the air like frost. Before Agatha could probe further, Celine rose suddenly. "Forgive me, I've overstayed already." She glided toward the door, opened it herself, and disappeared into the night. Agatha hurried after her. "Wait!" The garden lanterns revealed empty space. No silhouette on the path, no fading footsteps, only untouched soil, smooth, unbroken, as though no one had stepped on it at all. Ellie's voice trembled from behind her. "Agatha, who was that?" Agatha stared into the darkness, the cold creeping under her skin. "I intend to find out," she whispered, and for the first time doubt stirred in her heart about exactly what she was dealing with.
Once the last guest had left and the warm glow of candlelight faded from her dining room, Agatha returned to her kitchen, intent on inspecting every corner. The air carried a faint trace of burnt sugar, the same acrid sweet tang she had noticed when handling the cookbook's inserted page. Her stomach twisted slightly. Someone had been in her kitchen while she entertained guests, and it hadn't been Celine. Agatha moved carefully across the tiles, eyes scanning for any sign of disturbance. Most surfaces were untouched, yet a thin smear of dark residue caught her attention on the counter near the stove. It was subtle, nearly imperceptible unless one knew exactly what to look for. She crouched and leaned in closer. The stains were reminiscent of the splotches found on pages within the cookbook, herbs or spices that left marks resistant to cleaning, lingering as if they carried meaning beyond the ordinary. She tapped her finger along the edge. No explanation, no accidental spill. Whoever had been here had left a signature. Agatha straightened, mind racing. Patterns were forming. The missing page from her cookbook, the strange visitor at the dinner,
the recurring burnt sugar smell. It all hinted at a deliberate thread weaving through the chaos. Nothing about this was random. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it from her pocket. Roy Silver calling. She answered immediately. "Agatha," Roy said breathlessly, "I might have something for you. Remember Eugenia Crowther? I dug up an old magazine article from the late 60s about her final days." Agatha sank onto a stool. "Go on," Roy continued. "She claimed that someone was sabotaging her recipes, turning harmless dishes into dangerous concoctions. She wrote it in the margins of her notes, kept it hidden in letters. People didn't believe her. They thought she'd gone mad." Agatha's brow furrowed. So someone was deliberately making her recipes lethal, or at least claiming they could be. "Exactly," Roy said. "And if you think about it, the missing pages, the warnings, the strange inserted chapters, it matches. Someone may have continued her work, or is pretending to." Agatha set her phone aside and turned back to the counter, letting her eyes drift over the dark smear once more. Sabotage, disguised as mystery, and all of it disguised as normal culinary instruction. Her mind spun with possibilities. Perhaps the recipes themselves were a kind of code, subtle warnings hidden within ordinary instructions, measurements slightly off, words carefully chosen, ingredients that shouldn't be combined. Whoever had added the inserted page might have been leaving a deliberate signal, not just a threat. She stood and crossed to the cookbook, her fingers brushing the warm leather cover. "A coding warning," she whispered to herself. "Someone doesn't just want this read, they want it understood correctly." The kitchen smelled faintly of burnt sugar, lingering as though the house itself was reminding her to pay attention. Agatha closed her eyes and inhaled. Every clue, every odd smell, every smear of residue was a piece of the puzzle, and the puzzle wasn't finished. She set the cookbook on the counter and ran her hand through her hair. One thing was clear. Someone wanted her to see it, and someone wanted her to understand it. The question remained, could she decode it before the next move was made?
Chapter 5. The Secret Ingredient. Agatha spread the cookbook, the handwritten pages, and her scattered notes across the dining table, creating a chaotic mosaic of parchment, ink, and scribbled observations. The warm glow of her kitchen lantern illuminated each item, and she leaned over, tracing lines of thought, as though the light itself might reveal the answers. Her eyes moved from page to page. Ingredients that seemed ordinary at first glance, rosemary, clove, a pinch of saffron, suddenly struck her as unusual in combination. Not just unusual, but deliberate. Each recipe listed nearby streets, cottages, or landmarks tucked subtly into the directions. A spoonful of sugar by the old elm. Stir clockwise until the weather vane aligns with the church steeple. Agatha frowned. These weren't instructions for cooking. They were coordinates. A map encoded in culinary terms. She scribbled furiously in her notebook, connecting dots, drawing circles around names. Old family surnames appeared repeatedly. Theteridge, Diggle, Blunt. Each matched names she had already noted in her interviews. The cookbook was less a manual for preparing food and more a ledger of hidden allegiances, grudges, and history. Agatha's lips pressed together. Whoever had assembled these recipes had done so with meticulous care, weaving past rivalries into the guise of culinary charm. One name recurred far more than any other: Callista Hale. Agatha's heart skipped. She had read about Callista Hale before. Rumors of a fiercely competitive chef from the 1970s, a woman said to have envied Eugenia Crowther's success to the point of obsession. Every recipe that bore her subtle signature seemed to contain a warning or a challenge. The patterns aligned, the pieces fit together, and Agatha realized the cookbook was essentially a map pointing toward old rivalries, perhaps even dangerous ones that had never been forgotten. Her mind raced. The thought of someone following these ancient grudges into the present sent a shiver down her spine. She bent closer to the pages, tracing ingredient lists that seemed coded like letters in a cipher. Each peculiarity, stains, page numbers, repeated measurements, now hinted at deeper meaning. Whoever had inserted the fatal chapter understood this game. Whoever had observed her guided her attention to these patterns. A sudden creak from outside the kitchen made her freeze. Agatha's eyes snapped toward the window. At first, she saw nothing but the gentle sway of hedges in the evening breeze. Then a shadow flickered between the dense leaves of the garden hedge. She leaned closer, heart tightening. Someone was there, watching her, moving cautiously as if to remain unseen. Agatha took a silent breath, lowering herself just enough to observe without revealing herself. The figure paused, almost as if acknowledging her presence in a glance that could not be returned. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the shadow slipped behind the thick greenery and vanished from sight. The quiet returned, broken only by the distant chime of the village clock. She exhaled, pressing her hand to her chest. Whoever had been observing her was patient, careful, perhaps even expecting her to find the patterns she now understood. The cookbook was no longer just a curiosity. It was a signal, a warning, and a puzzle. And someone out there, watching silently, knew she was unraveling it.
Agatha woke with a start, the faint, sweet scent of burnt sugar curling through the darkness of her bedroom. She bolted upright, clutching the quilt, and listened. The cottage was still, the wind whispering softly through the cracks in the window frame. Yet the smell, odd, insistent, lingered. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, careful not to disturb Marmalade, who twitched an ear but remained curled in the corner. The kitchen, of course. Her heart thumped in her chest as she padded barefoot across the creaking floorboards. Every shadow seemed sharper than usual. Every candle cast long, quivering shapes against the walls. When she entered the kitchen, she froze. The cookbook lay open on the table. Agatha's brow furrowed. She had locked it away before bed, secured the doors, and double-checked the windows. Yet there it was, spread wide, as though someone or something had deliberately placed it for her to see. She stepped closer, careful not to breathe too heavily. Her eyes were drawn to the final page. Blank earlier in the evening, it now bore writing in ink that seemed to shimmer slightly under the soft lamplight. Elegant, looping handwriting, crisp and unfamiliar, read, "Finish the recipe." Agatha's pulse quickened. She swallowed hard. The message could only mean one thing. Someone, or something, wanted her to act. Her mind raced through possibilities. An intruder? A prank? Or was this the strange property of the cookbook itself, revealing instructions independently of any human hand? She reached for her phone and dialed a number she hoped would provide reassurance without escalating panic. "Bill Wong," she whispered once he picked up. "Agatha, everything all right?" Bill's voice carried the usual calm, but she could sense his underlying concern. I think someone or something has been in my kitchen. The cookbook, it's open, and there's a new message on the last page. Finish the recipe." Her voice trembled slightly. Bill was silent for a long beat. "Stay calm. Don't touch the book. I'll come by and investigate quietly. No one else needs to know yet." Agatha nodded, even though he couldn't see her. She lowered the phone and studied the page again. The words seemed to pulse faintly, urging her forward. Her stomach twisted in anticipation and dread. She knew she must resist, yet a small, insistent curiosity tickled at the edges of her mind. Someone or some force was guiding her toward the recipe, pushing her with a subtle but unmistakable pressure. Marmalade stirred, sensing her tension, and arguing against instinct, Agatha carefully closed the book. It was not time to act, not yet. A soft knock at the back door froze her mid-breath. Agatha's eyes darted to the shadowed frame. The knock came again, light but deliberate, carrying a rhythm that suggested knowledge. Someone who knew she was alone, alert, and aware. Her hand hovered near the latch. She didn't recognize the sound, but instinct warned her the night was no longer just quiet. It had become deliberate, watching. Her mind raced. Whoever or whatever was behind the cookbook's messages, they were patient, clever,
and observant, and now, apparently, at her door.
Chapter 6. A Kitchen of Shadows. The soft knock at the back door had rattled Agatha's nerves more than she cared to admit. She approached cautiously, hand hovering near the latch, listening for any sound beyond the rhythmic tap. The night was still, the garden shadows deep and impenetrable, yet the smell of burnt sugar, the same faint tang she had smelled earlier, seemed to drift closer. Taking a steadying breath, she opened the door a fraction. An elderly man stood on the threshold, leaning slightly on a walking stick. His hair was white and tousled, eyes sharp despite age, and his coat hung loosely over a slouched frame. "Mrs. Raisin," his voice was gravelly but urgent, "I need a word with you." "Do I know you?" He shook his head. "Not yet. I am Giles Crowther, Eugenia Crowther's brother. Estranged, yes, but I am the last living member of that family who remembers what she tried to protect." His gaze darted behind him nervously, as though expecting pursuit. Agatha stepped back to allow him in. "Come in, then. Quickly. You're not exactly subtle." Giles eased into her kitchen, eyes never leaving hers. He gestured at the cookbook lying closed on the counter. "That book. It is dangerous. Eugenia hid secrets within its recipes, but they were never meant for ordinary hands. They expose sabotage she endured, schemes that could ruin or kill the unwary." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "If anyone has told you to finish the recipe, they do not have your safety in mind." Agatha frowned, gripping the edge of the counter. "So, someone is trying to manipulate me?" "Yes." Giles' voice trembled slightly. "She did not vanish. Eugenia was murdered, poisoned, I believe, by someone she trusted, someone who sought her knowledge, her acclaim, and her secrets. This book, it has drawn that danger forward, reaching for those who would pry too deeply." Agatha's heart thumped. "And you're saying I should destroy it?" Giles nodded gravely. "Yes, nothing but obsession and death have ever followed that cookbook. I have spent decades tracking its whereabouts, hoping no one would fall into the trap she left behind. You must burn it, Mrs. Raisin. Do not test its pages. Do not read the inserted chapter. Do not—" His words were cut off by a sudden movement outside. Giles stiffened, ears alert. "They're here," he whispered. "Someone has been watching. I should not linger." Agatha's eyes widened. "Who? What?" Giles pivoted toward the back door, cane tapping sharply against the tile. "No time to explain fully. Trust your instincts. Protect yourself. Protect what you value. And for God's sakes, do not follow curiosity blindly this time." Before Agatha could ask another question, he hurried past her toward the shadowed garden. She ran to the door, but he had already disappeared into the darkness, leaving nothing behind but the faint echo of his footsteps. She stepped onto the stone path, scanning the lane beyond the hedges. Movement flickered in the distance, a figure retreating, watching, vanishing as though swallowed by the night. Someone had been spying again, someone powerful enough to drive Giles off before a full explanation could be given. Agatha's mind raced. Eugenia's brother, the warning, the murder claim, all of it suggested forces larger than petty village squabbles. The cookbook, the inserted page, the anonymous messages, they were pieces in a web of ambition, obsession, and danger. Agatha closed the back door slowly, fingers lingering on the latch as she exhaled shakily. Burning the book was suddenly no longer a theoretical choice. It was a necessity. Yet the curiosity that had driven her this far refused to release its grip. Someone, or several someones, was orchestrating a careful, lethal game, and she was now squarely in its path. Agatha realized that the days ahead would be far more perilous than any cookbook-related mystery she had ever faced, and that someone watching her from the dark lane was just the beginning.
Agatha sat at her dining table, the cookbook open before her once again. The room was quiet, save for the faint ticking of the mantel clock and the occasional rustle of marmalade stretching nearby. Giles Crowther's warning echoed in her mind. Do not test its pages. Do not read the inserted chapter. Yet Agatha's curiosity, honed through years of detective work, would not allow her to ignore the book's subtle oddity. She began examining the pages carefully, holding each leaf over the soft glow of the kitchen lamp, then lightly above the embers of the dying fire. Gradually, faint etchings appeared, like whispers from the past. They had been invisible in normal light, but revealed themselves under heat. Tiny annotations written in Eugenia Crowther's elegant hand. Some were comments on ingredients, others on methods, but a recurring theme emerged, a warning about a saboteur who had tampered with her recipes and sought her downfall. Agatha leaned closer, following the intricate notes. One marking caught her eye, a small symbol etched in the corner of nearly every recipe Crowther had flagged, a cleaver intersecting a quill, delicately drawn, yet unmistakable. Her pulse quickened. Something about it felt familiar, yet she could not place it immediately. By the next morning, she brought the symbol to Mrs. Bloxby, who had agreed to assist with deciphering anything historically significant. Mrs. Bloxby's eyes widened as she examined the faint sketches. My word, that's the emblem of Callista Hale's old culinary society. It's ancient, rarely used after the 70s. Hale's followers, devoted ones, adopted it as a signature. Agatha's mind raced. Callista Hale, the jealous rival, the one whose obsession had shadowed Crowther's career decades ago. If someone was using this symbol now, it could only mean that a surviving follower, or perhaps someone directly linked to Callista herself, was active, watching, and aware of her investigations. The knowledge sent a chill crawling up Agatha's spine. She returned home that evening, the symbol etched in her thoughts like a warning. As she pushed open her front door, a small envelope lay neatly slipped under the mat. Agatha's fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up. She unfolded the paper, revealing a message written in hurried, angular script. "You're cooking up trouble." Her stomach tightened. Whoever had left it had been inside her awareness, observing her routines, understanding her methods. The tone was unmistakably threatening, a silent assertion that her pursuit of the cookbook had not gone unnoticed. Agatha set the note on the table and examined the cookbook once more. The etched cleaver and quill symbol seemed to stare back at her from the pages, a deliberate reminder of the unseen presence guiding or manipulating the unfolding events. Each page, each annotation, each subtle warning now carried not just historical significance, but a present danger. She exhaled, tension coiling like a spring in her shoulders. The threat was real. The saboteur, someone connected to Callista Hale, was not a ghost of the past. They were alive, patient, and watching her every move, and they intended to ensure she understood the peril of meddling with Crowther's work. Agatha closed the cookbook slowly, pressing her palms against the warm leather cover. The game was escalating, and the stakes were higher than ever. Someone was orchestrating the pieces with precision, and she had just become the next target.
Chapter 7. The Final Ingredient. Agatha sat in the dim glow of her dining room, the cookbook open before her, pages trembling slightly under her fingertips. Every annotation, every hidden note, every faint symbol she had discovered loomed in her mind like a puzzle demanding completion. She had promised herself she would not cook the fatal recipe, but tonight she needed to confront it directly. Not with pots and pans, but with logic and deduction. Carefully, she traced each ingredient line, aligning them with local landmarks and historical records she had compiled. A pinch of thyme by the weather vane corresponded to the old Crowther estate. A twist of lemon near the church steeple pointed to the long-abandoned village hall where culinary competitions had once drawn crowds. Each measurement, each obscure herb, each seemingly arbitrary step was a cipher leading her through a map of Carsey's hidden culinary past. The deeper she delved, the clearer it became. The cookbook was not a manual, but a trail. Someone had designed it to guide the reader to a destination, and tonight Agatha would follow it under the cover of darkness, to see where it ended. Dressing in a warm coat and taking a flashlight, she stepped silently into the garden, careful to disturb neither stone path nor hedgerow. The moon hung low and silver, casting long shadows that twisted and slithered among the bushes. Agatha's pulse quickened as she moved toward the last location indicated, a country kitchen long abandoned, the kind that had hosted regional chef competitions decades ago. Windows were broken, and the door sagged slightly on its hinges, but the faint scent of herbs, decades old, seemed to guide her forward. She pushed the door open cautiously, and the wooden boards groaned under her weight. Dust motes floated in the air, catching the flashlight in lazy golden arcs. Her breath caught. At the far end of the room, a figure waited, pale, upright, precise, wearing the same faded chef jacket she had seen in the village, hair pulled back tightly. "Mrs. Raisin," she said softly, her voice eerily calm. "I wondered how long it would take you to arrive." Agatha's heart hammered. "Who are you?" The woman smiled faintly, a measured, unsettling expression. "Callista Hale's daughter. My mother's work was never finished, and I've devoted my life to completing her legacy. Eugenia Crowther. She claimed genius, but she cheated, misled, and, well, she deserved to be exposed." Agatha frowned, confusion and disbelief warring inside her. "You mean all this, the cookbook, the notes, the threats, were to prove Crowther was a fraud?" "Yes," the woman said, stepping closer. "She hid her mistakes beneath flattery and clever recipes. My mother's society had standards, and she betrayed them. I've simply followed the breadcrumbs Crowther left, making sure the truth is finally revealed." Agatha's mind raced. Years of research, the missing page, the cryptic notes, the shadowy threats, it all felt suddenly complicated by this human obsession. "But people have been hurt," she said slowly. "Recipes that caused fear, illness, threats to anyone who came near the book. That can't be justified." The pale woman's eyes flickered, almost reluctantly. "Sacrifice is part of uncovering the truth," she whispered. "And Mrs. Raisin, you are lucky to witness it before it's too late." Agatha realized that this confrontation was not just about history, revenge, or legacy. It was about human obsession, about control, and the consequences of secrets left unchecked. And now, standing in the midnight kitchen, she faced the living embodiment of all that danger.
Agatha's eyes narrowed as she studied Callista's daughter. "You're saying Crowther ruined her rivals' careers? Sabotaged recipes? Fabricated threats?" The pale woman's lips pressed into a thin line. She was brilliant, yes, but brilliant with a streak of deception. Her reputation was built on lies. She manipulated, sabotaged, even threatened those who challenged her. That book, every page, was her stage, her legacy. It was time someone exposed it. Agatha's mind raced, comparing these claims with the evidence she had painstakingly collected. Notes hidden in the pages, the faint etchings revealed under heat, Giles Crowther's warnings, the ledger showing missing or stolen cookbooks, all pointed to Crowther as a victim, not a perpetrator. "No," Agatha said firmly, "the evidence contradicts your story. Crowther was targeted, not the other way around. Someone is rewriting history, using your obsession to mislead you and me." The pale woman's eyes flickered with doubt. "Then what am I supposed to believe?" Agatha took a step closer. "Believe what you can verify. The notes, the etchings, the hidden warnings, they are Crowther's voice, not her lies." A tense silence followed, broken only by the creak of the old kitchen boards. The pale woman's jaw tightened, and then, with sudden decisiveness, she reached for the cookbook. Flames danced at her fingertips as she produced a lighter from her pocket. She said, "Then it ends here. All these lies must be destroyed."
Agatha lunged forward, grabbing the leather-bound volume. "Stop! You're destroying the evidence! The truth isn't in burning it, it's in Crowther's notes." For a moment, the woman hesitated, the lighter hovering over the pages. Agatha held her gaze, steady and firm, while Marmalade hissed softly at the edge of the shadows. "Look closer," Agatha whispered. "Examine the etchings under heat, the hidden symbols. That's where the real story is." Before the tension could escalate further, Agatha's phone vibrated. Bill Wong had arrived, having tracked her location. She stepped aside and answered. "Bill?" Bill said calmly, though his voice carried urgency. "I've run forensic tests on the inserted recipe page. It wasn't written decades ago. It was penned only a few days ago. Someone is manipulating history and perception, planting evidence, shaping fears, and controlling narratives." The pale woman's face went pale. "Days ago? That can't be. I followed the lineage, the legacy. Her voice faltered, uncertainty replacing her previous confidence. Agatha's hand tightened on the cookbook. "Exactly. You've been misled, just as I have been. The truth is not what you think it is." A sudden noise from the shadows startled all three. A faint rustling, deliberate and quiet, echoed through the abandoned kitchen. They froze, eyes scanning the room. Whomever, or whatever, was there, had entered unnoticed, observing the confrontation, waiting for the right moment to act. The temperature seemed to drop, and every heartbeat in the room felt loud, urgent, a signal that the climax of this mystery was no longer distant. Someone, or something, was orchestrating events, and Agatha understood, with a rising pulse, that the final pieces of this dangerous puzzle were about to fall into place. Chapter 8. The Fatal Chapter Revealed. The abandoned kitchen was silent save for the distant whisper of the wind through broken window panes. Agatha, Bill Wong, and Callista's daughter stood tensely around the worn wooden table, the leather-bound cookbook between them. The faint scent of burnt sugar lingered, a ghostly reminder of the many secrets the book held. Suddenly, movement in the shadows caught their attention. A figure stepped forward from the gloom, a pale woman with sharp, calculating features, wearing a faded chef's jacket that seemed oddly familiar. Agatha's eyes widened. The realization hit her like a sudden chill. This was the same woman who had appeared unannounced at her dinner weeks ago, only now her presence carried an unmistakable menace. "Who are you?" Agatha demanded, voice firm despite the pounding of her heart. The woman smiled, though it was a sharp, unsettling smile. "I am Penwell's sister," she said, voice low and controlled, "and I am the one who has been orchestrating all of this." Callista's daughter blinked, confusion crossing her features. "Penwell? But I thought—" "Exactly," the woman interrupted. "Everyone thought my brother was the only historian concerned with Crowther's work, but I have long resented Callista Hale's influence over the culinary world. Crowther was a genius, yet she vanished because of fear. Fear I cultivated. The feud between Crowther and Callista? That was me, carefully nudging events to provoke conflict, forge legends, and ensure my control over the narrative." Agatha's mind spun. The recent forged recipe pages, the stolen inserts, the mysterious messages, they all fell into place. This was not a rivalry of chefs, nor a ghostly obsession. It was human obsession. Manipulation executed with patience and precision over decades. "You've been watching me," Agatha said cautiously, taking a small step back. "All of this, the cookbook, the warnings, the burnt sugar, it was you?" The woman's eyes glinted with triumph. "Of course. The legend of the fatal chapter is far more effective than direct confrontation. Fear keeps people obedient. The cookbook, the inserted pages, the notes. You've been guided carefully, Mrs. Raisin. And now I am here to reclaim control." Before Agatha could respond, the woman lunged toward the table, hands stretching for the leather-bound cookbook. Agatha instinctively grabbed one edge, holding firm. Bill Wong stepped forward, but the woman's strength was surprising, desperate, frantic, honed by obsession. The book slid across the table, teetering at the edge. Agatha's fingers dug into the cover as the woman yanked from the opposite side, a fierce tug-of-war erupting between them. "You cannot let anyone manipulate it," the saboteur hissed. "This legacy, this truth, it belongs to me." Callista's daughter stepped forward, hesitating as if unsure where her loyalties lay. "Stop! This isn't about legacy anymore," she cried. The struggle intensified, the cookbook threatening to fall to the dusty floor. Agatha pivoted, using her weight to counter the woman's pull. Bill Wong's hand reached for the lighter remnants of trust and reason, trying to intercept the desperate fingers aiming for the pages. Finally, with a sharp twist and a heave, Agatha managed to drag the cookbook to the center of the table, out of immediate reach. The saboteur stumbled back, eyes blazing with rage and disbelief. Her shoulders slumped slightly, the tension momentarily broken. Agatha exhaled slowly, gripping the book firmly. Her pulse hammered, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The true villain, the orchestrator of fear, obsession, and manipulation, had revealed herself. And for the first time, the tangled web of Crowther's lost recipes, Callista's influence, and the village's quiet legends had a face, and it was staring directly at her.
The struggle ended almost as abruptly as it had begun. With Bill Wong's steady presence, Agatha managed to subdue the saboteur, pinning her just long enough for the police, alerted by Bill's prior instructions, to arrive. The woman's protests fell on deaf ears as officers cuffed her, her sharp features softening with the faintest trace of disbelief and defeat. Evidence uncovered during questioning revealed her long history of manipulation, forged documents, and deliberate deception spanning decades. Every mysterious message, every carefully orchestrated threat traced back to her calculated obsession with controlling the legacy of both Crowther and Callista Hale. Agatha exhaled slowly, pressing her palms to her face before straightening. Bill offered a reassuring nod. "All handled, Agatha. You did brilliantly." She smiled, her tension easing slightly, though the adrenaline still hummed under her skin. Not long after, Giles Crowther arrived, stepping cautiously into the kitchen, now stripped of tension. His expression was a mixture of relief and quiet pride. "You've done more than uncover a saboteur," he said softly. "You've cleared my sister's name. The hidden notes you uncovered, they were warnings, not confessions. Eugenia fled because she feared for her life, not because she deceived anyone. She lived quietly abroad for many years, passing away peacefully without drawing attention. That is the truth, and now it is safe." Agatha's chest swelled with quiet satisfaction. For once, the tangled web of deceit and obsession had been untangled, and justice, if delayed, had arrived. She looked at the cookbook lying inert on her table, its worn leather cover seeming almost harmless now. Giles continued, "I recommend sealing it away, in a museum archive or a secure library. Let the world know of its history, but let no one manipulate it again." She nodded. The idea appealed to her deeply. After weeks of suspense, fear, and careful deduction, she longed for finality. Together they ensured the cookbook was carefully wrapped and transported to a local museum archive,
its secrets locked away under controlled circumstances, safe from curious hands or obsessive minds. Returning to her cottage, Agatha finally allowed herself a moment of stillness. She poured a cup of tea, its warmth comforting as she inhaled the familiar scents of her kitchen. Marmalade purred on the windowsill, stretching luxuriously in the sunbeams that spilled across the floor. For the first time in weeks, she could truly relax, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. She sipped the tea slowly, allowing herself a small, satisfied smile. The mystery, the danger, and the obsession all were behind her now. Yet, as she set the cup down, a faint scent of burnt sugar drifted lazily through the room, curling in gentle spirals from the corner of the kitchen. Agatha inhaled, then exhaled, a soft chuckle escaping her lips. Some mysteries, she thought, were meant to linger only as a memory. Not everything needed an explanation. Some scents, some shadows were best left to the imagination. And for now, that was perfectly acceptable. With that, Agatha settled into her favorite chair, tea in hand, the afternoon sun warming her face, content to watch Marmalade chase a lazy sunbeam and let the quiet, at last, settle comfortably over Carsley Cottage.